Good morning, everyone. Good to see you, Andy. Good to see you, Catalina, Amy. Hi, Ryan. Ryan says, I have too much work to do today to stick around for the whole sutta, but I was hoping to get the 8 precepts for the upasta. Yes, your hopes will come true. Hello, Cam. Good to see you, Kyle and Jens. And let me close the window because there's like a nice okay, much better. There was an interesting ray of sunlight doing funny tricks on your face, Bate. All right, hello, Dami, Victoria, and Ella. Welcome for today's session, and good morning, Bante. All right, so I'll pass it on to Bante, actually, we can take it from here.
So this morning it was suggested that since it's the Vasettha, we could start by taking the 8 precepts. So the 8 precepts are an expanded version of the 5 precepts, which is designed to incorporate some elements of monastic life, some elements of monastic practice. So it's quite common for Buddhists to take the 8 precepts on the Imposita day and commit to following the 8 precepts for 24 hours for the course of the day. Though if 24 hours seems like too much for you, do it anyway. But actually, realistically, even if you can just follow the 8 precepts for a few hours, that's already pretty good. But realistically, one day is not that much. So I'll just explain briefly the 8 precepts, and then we'll do the precept ceremony in Pali. First, not killing any living being. So that includes the spiders and ants that are sharing isolation with you. So we treat them with kindness and respect. Not taking what is not given, so that means not stealing. That also means being careful about how we handle other people's possessions. So not taking something that belongs to somebody else unless we're completely positive that they're okay with it. And if we do take something that belongs to somebody else under the proper conditions, then we use their possessions carefully and respectfully so that they don't get damaged or lost. The 3rd precept, under the normal 5 precepts, the 3rd precept is to refrain from sexual misconduct, which means things like infidelity, adultery, and assault. But in the 8 precepts, we go a step farther and refrain from all sexual activity for one day. The 4th precept, so not telling lies, not engaging in intentional false speech of any kind. So being honest, and being honest doesn't necessarily mean oversharing. It just means not telling lies. So that doesn't mean that you need to say absolutely everything, like, good morning, your hair looks awful today and I hated the breakfast you made. That's called oversharing. Honesty just means not lying. It doesn't mean that you have to say every painful, horrible truth that occurs to your mind. The 5th one, which, believe it or not, is actually something we should be following every day, not just on the Imposita day, is to refrain from using any kind of intoxicants. So not using any kind of alcohol or any other substance which weakens our mindfulness and reduces our self-restraint. The 6th one is to refrain from eating at the wrong time, which is usually interpreted in the Theravada world to mean not eating after noon. So on the Imposita day, we make a commitment to practice self-restraint in regards to food. So we can have a nice breakfast and we can have a nice lunch, and then we can have a nice refraining from eating food for the rest of the day. So in the evening, you can still have some juice or a little bit of dark chocolate or some cheese, as we do here at the monastery, but otherwise refraining from eating any kind of solid or substantial food. The seventh one is to refrain from dance, song, music, watching shows, wearing jewelry, and any kind of cosmetics. So these also are important elements of renunciant practice. So not distracting and disturbing the mind with various kinds of entertainment. So music in particular is extremely harmful to one's meditation practice. Music disrupts our mindfulness, distracts our mind, creates noise and agitation and disturbance in the mind. So we really want to try to avoid stirring up the mind any more than strictly necessary. And jewelry and cosmetics are just forms of vanity. They're ways that we try to make ourselves look better. But that's kind of beside the point, because we've already taken the precept of refraining from sexual activity. And for this day, in theory, we're focusing just on doing our spiritual practice. So we don't need to worry about looking attractive. We don't need to worry about trying to pretty up this bag of blood that we're walking around in. And the last one is to refrain from using luxurious beds. So this one, you might be reflecting on your bed and thinking, uh-oh, I've already failed on this one. Well, in that case, you can sleep on the floor or sleep on the couch and you'll be totally fine for a day. You won't die. I mean, you might, but probably not on account of not using your fancy, luxurious bed. The idea here is to try to discourage us from just lounging around in bed more than we need to. So these are the 8 precepts. So I encourage you to commit to these, and you all have the link to the chanting. So the way this will work is that I will chant it phrase by phrase, and after each one I'll pause. And Ayasoma has volunteered to be the voice of the lay chanter. She's not a lay person, she's a monastic. But you can chant along with Ayasoma as she repeats after me line by line. And again, try to take on the meaning of what's being said, not just repeating it as empty words and phrases. Okay? So bringing your hands together, cultivating a mind of respect for Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and repeat after me. Aham bhante.
Aham bhante.
Tisaranena saha.
Tisaranena saha.
Attanga.
Attanga.
Samannagatam.
Samannagatam.
Uposatha silang.
Uposatha silam.
Dhammang yachami.
Dhammam yachami.
Anugaham katva.
Anugaham katva.
Silang deta.
Silam deta.
Me bhante.
Me bhante.
And then homage to the Buddha. Once again, repeat after me. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
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 Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddham saranam gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sangham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Saragamanang paripurnang.
Amabante.
Sutta-Nipāta veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sutta-Nipāta veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Adinādana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinādana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Abrahmacharya veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Brahmacharya veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadattana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadattana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Vikala bhojana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Vikala bhojana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Nacha gita vadita visukadasana.
Nacha gita vadita visukadasana.
Mala gandha vilepana dharana mandana vibhusanatthana.
Mala gandha vilepana dharana mandana vibhusanattana.
Veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Uchasayana mahasayana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Uchasayana mahasayana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Idang me silang magapalanyana sapachayo hotu.
Idam me silam magapala jnana sapachayo hotu.
Apamadena sampadeta.
Amabante.
Silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibbutting yanti, tasma silang visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, very good. At least I assume that was very good because I could only hear Ayasoma, but I assume the rest of you did a very good job. And even if not, that's okay, as long as you've made the commitment to follow the precepts. Even if your Pali pronunciation was less than perfect, which realistically it probably was, then It's that internal commitment to following the precepts for a day that really matters. So today we'll be talking about the Vasettha Sutta. The Vasettha Sutta is, Ayasoma says it's one of her favorite suttas, but she says that about almost every sutta, so I'm not exactly sure what that means anymore. And I'm actually not convinced we're going to get through this in one
It's
day.
in 2 days, today
Okay.
and tomorrow.
So did you have any idea in mind as to where to divide it in half? Or is that up to you to figure out?
Up to you.
Okay, so we'll see how much we get through in a reasonable amount of time.
Actually, I think so. Is it? No, maybe it's actually just today. Let me check. No, it's the other. It's the Sabbasava Sutta that we have in 2. Yeah, today it's the whole day.
Today
Vasettha.
only. All
Today
right.
only.
Well, I'll see if we can get through this. Okay, so the Vasettha Sutta. Without further ado, let's jump right in. As usual, I'll read part of the sutta and explain it, read some more and explain it, and at the end we'll have questions. So you can type in your questions at any time, and we'll go through them at the end. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling in the forest grove near Ichanangala. On this occasion, many famous, wealthy Brahmins were living in Ichanangala, such as the Brahmin Chanki, the Brahmin Taruka, the Brahmin Pokarasati, the Brahmin Janusoni, the Brahmin Todeya, and other famous wealthy Brahmins. Then while the students Vasettha and Bharadvaja were walking for exercise, this conversation arose. How is one a Brahmin? The student Bharadvaja said, Sir, when one is well born on both one's maternal side and paternal side, of pure descent as far back as the 7th ancestor with no disruption, irreproachable in terms of birth, then one is a Brahmin. And the student Vasettha said, Sir, when one is virtuous and well behaved, then one is a Brahmin. Bharadvaja was not able to convince Vasettha, and Vasettha was not able to convince Bharadvaja. So the term Brahmin, in the suttas, it has 2 main meanings. So one meaning is any kind of holy person, any kind of sincere spiritual practitioner, especially one who has made substantial progress in training their minds, substantial progress in developing a path of spiritual perfection. The other usage of the word Brahmin was to refer to the hereditary social class of priests and ritual specialists, which is the way the word is used most commonly these days. These days, when people say Brahmin, they almost exclusively are referring to the hereditary social class of priests and ritual specialists in India, and to a much lesser degree in some of the surrounding countries. But in the suttas, in particular, we see the word Brahmin used in a much broader way, which is referring to, again, any kind of devoted spiritual practitioner, regardless of their ancestry, regardless of who their parents were or what their social status is. And the impression one gets from the suttas is that the caste system, as we know it these days in modern India, had not yet become quite so rigid and solidified. It was still somewhat fluid. So there was still debate at the time as to what defined a Brahmin, what made a person a holy person. And so the Buddha had his own way of defining and using the word Brahmin, which was somewhat different from how it's used in modern day Hinduism. So this was the argument between Vasettha and Bharadvaja. So Bharadvaja was taking the stance more like the contemporary Hindus, of saying that being a Brahmin, being a holy person, depends upon your family line. If your family has been Brahmins for 7 generations or more, then that means you are a Brahmin. Whereas Vasettha was taking the stance that it depends upon one's conduct. If someone is virtuous and well-behaved, then that's what makes them a holy person. That's what makes them a Brahmin. So since they couldn't agree with each other, they decided to go to the Buddha. So then Vasettha said to Bharadvaja, Sir Bharadvaja, the contemplative Gautama, a son of the second clan who became a renunciate, now dwells in the forest grove near Ichanangala. A good rumor has been spread about that honorable Gautama, which says, he is the blessed one, the worthy one, the fully self-enlightened one, perfect in knowledge and conduct, sublime, the world knower, the unsurpassed teacher of devas and humans, the awakened one, the blessed one. Come, Sir Bharadvaja, we will approach the blessed one and ask him about this. We will hold it in whatever way the blessed one explains it. Yes, sir, Bharadvaja replied to Vasettha. So I suspect that Vasettha already knew more or less what the Buddha was going to say. This is probably why he suggested this as the tiebreaker in the argument. Then Vasettha and Bharadvaja approached the Blessed One and conversed with him. When the appropriate polite conversation was finished, they sat to one side. When they were seated to one side, Vasettha addressed the Blessed One in verse. So most of the sutta, by the way, is in verse. It's in Pali poetry, which doesn't translate terribly well. It can be translated literally, but that loses most of the poetic flavor. But this is also relevant because although it's not explicitly stated anywhere in the suttas that I'm aware of, it's a common belief by scholars that there was a practice at the time of people expressing philosophical or spiritual or religious concepts in spontaneous verse. And this was meant to represent your mastery of the subject. Like it was a demonstration of your oratory abilities. If you could compose poetic ways of saying things. Especially if you could compose them spontaneously without prior preparation. And this is something that the Buddha does many, many places in the suttas, is he spontaneously utters poetic statements of Dhamma. So, Vasettha addressed the Blessed One in verse. We are both sanctioned and acknowledged as bearers of the three knowledges. I am a student of Pokarasati, and this is a student of Taruka. We are completely familiar with everything stated in the three knowledges. We know the words and the explanations. We are equal to our teachers in recitations. There is a dispute between us about birth, Gautama. Bharadvaja says one is a Brahmin by birth, and I say it is by action. You know the way it is, seer. We are not able to convince each other. So we came to ask you, the Honorable One, reputed to be a completely enlightened being. Just as people salute the moon when it becomes full, in this world they respectfully honor Gautama. We ask Gautama, the I that has arisen in the world, is one a Brahmin by birth or by action? Explain to us what we do not understand, how to know a Brahmin. So this is how he starts. He starts by saying that they are masters of the three knowledges, which was the body of texts, what we call the Vedas in Hinduism. So the body of scriptural texts in Hinduism that Brahmins were expected to study and to memorize large amounts of, or all of, if possible. And they were meant to be able to analyze and explain the contents of these scriptures. But of course, Buddhism has nothing whatsoever to do with the Vedas. And the term three knowledges is used in Buddhism, but it's used to refer to something completely different than how it was used in Hinduism at the time. So then they come and ask the Buddha, and the Buddha says, Vasettha, I will explain to you sequentially and accurately an analysis of the distinctions in births among beings. He says, Know the grass and the trees, although they make no claim. Birth has produced their distinctive characteristics, and by birth they are different from each other. Then the moths, butterflies, ants, and termites. Birth has produced their distinctive characteristics, and by birth they are different from each other. Know the four-legged beings, both small and large. Birth has produced their distinctive characteristics, and by birth they are different from each other. Know those who move on their stomachs, long-backed snakes. Birth has produced their distinctive characteristics, and by birth they are different from each other. Know the fish and all those who live in water. Birth has produced their distinctive characteristics, and by birth they are different from each other. Know the birds and all the winged beings who fly through the sky. Birth has produced their distinctive characteristics, and by birth they are different from each other. In this way, we see that their differences are produced by birth. But among humans, there is no difference produced by birth. Not by the hair or the head, not by the ears or the eyes, not by the mouth or the nose, not by the lips or the eyebrows, not by the throat or the shoulders, not by the stomach or the back, not by the buttocks or the chest, not by the anus or the genitals, not by the hands or the feet, not by the fingers or the nails, not by the knees or the thighs, not by the color or the voice. There is no difference produced by birth, as it is with other beings. In human bodies, no discrimination can be found. Different human types are spoken of by designation alone. Among humans, no one who makes a living by herding cattle as a farmer, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. Among humans, no one who makes a living by crafting as a craftsman, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. Among humans, no one who makes a living by trading as a merchant, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. Among Brahmins, no one who makes a living by serving others as a servant, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. Among humans, no one who makes a living by stealing as a thief, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. Among humans, no one who makes a living by archery as a warrior, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. Among humans, no one who makes a living by priesthood as a priest, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. Among humans, no one who rules a town or country as a ruler, Vasettha, not a Brahmin. I do not call one a Brahmin based on a mother's womb, nor is one called a Brahmin if one possesses anything. But one who has nothing and attaches to nothing, that one I call a Brahmin. Having severed all fetters, one who is never disturbed, who has transcended all limitations, free of fetters, that one I call a Brahmin. Having cut the leash and harness, the chain and tether, an awakened one who has removed the lock, that I call a Brahmin. Even when abused, attacked, imprisoned, one who flawlessly endures it with patience as strong as an army, that one I call a Brahmin. Free of anger, acting appropriately, virtuous and humble, a tamed one, bearer of its final body, that one I call a Brahmin. Like water from a lotus leaf, like a mustard seed from a needle tip, one to whom sensual pleasure does not stick, that one I call a Brahmin. One who understands dukkha and has personally eliminated it here, unburdened and unfettered, that one I call a Brahmin. With profound wisdom and intelligence, skilled in what is and is not the path, who has attained the highest goal, that one I call a Brahmin. Not entangled with either householders or monastics, not valuing any abode, with few wishes, that one I call a Brahmin. One who has set aside violence towards living beings, whether weak or strong, who neither injures nor kills, that one I call a Brahmin. Unobstructed amidst the obstructed, enlightened amidst those who harm themselves, unattached amidst the attached, that one I call a Brahmin. One from whom lust, hatred, conceit, and denigration have fallen away like a mustard seed from a needle, that one I call a Brahmin. One who communicates gently, who speaks truthfully, and who does not adhere to anything, that one I call a Brahmin. One who does not steal anything, whether large or small, tiny or huge, beautiful or ugly, that one I call a Brahmin. One in whom no aspiration can be found for this world or another, free of aspiration and unfettered, that one I call a Brahmin. One in whom no underlying tendency can be found, who from direct knowledge is free of uncertainty and has attained immersion in the deathless, that one I call a Brahmin. One who has transcended both good and evil, sorrowless, stainless, and pure, that one I call a Brahmin. As spotless and pure as the moon, with a bright and tranquil mind, who has completely eliminated delight, that one I call a Brahmin. A meditator who has crossed beyond samsara, this dangerous, difficult domain of delusion and death, unagitated, free of uncertainty, enlightened through non-attachment, that one I call a Brahmin. One who has abandoned sensuality, a homeless renunciate who has completely eliminated sensual desire, that one I call a Brahmin. One who has abandoned craving, a homeless renunciate who has completely eliminated craving, that one I call a Brahmin. One who has abandoned connection to the human world and transcended connection to the divine. One who is not bound to any connection, that one I call a Brahmin. Having abandoned liking and disliking, cooled, free of acquisition, a hero who has conquered the entire world, that one I call a Brahmin. One who knows the death and rebirth of all beings, unstuck, sublime, and awakened, that one I call a Brahmin. One whose destination is not known by devas, gandharvas, or humans, an arhat whose corruptions have been eliminated, that one I call a Brahmin. One for whom there is nothing before, after, or in the middle, having nothing, attached to nothing, that one I call a Brahmin. A bull, a distinguished hero, a great sage, victorious, unagitated, cleansed, and awakened, that one I call a Brahmin. One who knows past lives and sees both heaven and hell, and has attained the elimination of birth, that one I call a Brahmin. It is a convention in this world to assign a name and clan. Produced by convention, they are assigned here and there. For a long time, those who do not know this have tended towards a wrong perspective. Not understanding, they say that by means of birth one is a Brahmin. It is not by birth that one is a Brahmin. It is not by birth that one is not a Brahmin. By action one is a Brahmin, and by action one is not a Brahmin. One is a farmer by action. One is a craftsman by action. One is a merchant by action. One is a servant by action. One is a thief by action. One is a warrior by action. One is a priest by action. One is a ruler by action. The world goes by action. The populace goes by action. Beings are bound to their actions, like the axle on which a wheel moves. By means of austerity, spiritual conduct, self-restraint, and training, by means of this, one is a Brahmin. This is the ultimate Brahmin. One who has the three knowledges, who is peaceful, done with further existence. Vasettha, no such a one as Brahma and Sakka. So, that's the verses the Buddha said. So I'll go through this a bit more slowly and explain a few particular points that are worth highlighting. First off, the Buddha speaks about different kinds of plants, insects, and animals, and notes that among those we can see a difference based on birth. So in other words, the different species of plants and animals are distinctly different from each other. So grass and trees are completely different from each other. They're only vaguely similar. But because of their genetics, there's a distinct difference which can be noticed. There's a distinct difference between moths and butterflies and ants and termites, so different kinds of insects. Again, we see distinct species, which are distinguished by their genes, by their birth. Four-legged beings, so cats, dogs, deer, foxes, squirrels, and so on. Again, these are distinctly different species. So their genetics, their birth makes a tremendous difference. among snakes, among fish, among birds. So he goes through this again, emphasizing that throughout the animal world, we see distinctly different species, which are identified from each other by their genetics. But he says among humans, there's no difference produced by birth. In other words, he's saying that one's spiritual capacity is not in any way affected by what kind of human genes one has. And he goes through many characteristics: hair, ears, eyes, mouth, nose, lips, eyebrows, throat, shoulders, etc. The ones which are particularly worth bringing out is the genitals. In other words, whether one is male or female or some other classification, that has no bearing on one's capacity to become a spiritually perfected being. And the other one that's particularly worth emphasizing is color. So one's skin color, what we generally call race, also doesn't have anything to do with one's spiritual ability, with one's potential for making progress on the spiritual path. And the Buddha says different human types are spoken of by designation alone. In other words, we talk about different races and different ethnicities and different nationalities and different social classes and so on. But those are just words that we make up. They're concepts that we make up which have no inherent reality. They have no relevance whatsoever to the actual capacities of human beings. Then the Buddha goes through emphasizing that the way we define people is based on what they do. So one who crafts, we call them a craftsman. One who steals, we call them a thief. One who rules, we call them a ruler. Based on what they do, not based upon their genetics, not based upon their family, but based upon what they actually do with their life. Then the Buddha goes into a long description of an enlightened being. So several different verses which are describing characteristics of an enlightened being. And for each one he says, this is what I call a Brahmin. So again, Brahmin, when used by the Buddha, almost always means a spiritually developed person. Someone who has made substantial progress along the spiritual path. So I'll just pick out a few of these that in particular can be explained a bit more. I mean, realistically, I could spend hours and hours just going through the details of all these verses. So first off, one who does not possess anything or attach to anything. So this doesn't actually mean that we don't possess anything, because I mean, we have our robes and we have our bowls and we have a few other things that we need to get by, but rather it has to do with the attitude of clinging, the attitude of attachment, of thinking that we must have certain things in order to be okay or in order to be happy. And in particular, it's referring to the tendency to attach to perspectives and ideas and viewpoints as well. So also being willing to relinquish whatever pops into our mind rather than adhering to it. Then there's a section, even when abused, attacked, imprisoned, one who flawlessly endures it with patience as strong as an army. So this also is really important, because often we feel like we are being abused or attacked or mistreated. And sometimes we actually are being mistreated. But whether we are or aren't, the practice that we develop is to patiently endure. So not to get angry, not to fight back, not to form resentments, not to attack our attacker, but rather to patiently endure without breaking our equanimity, without sacrificing our loving kindness. Then there's this lovely little simile, like water from a lotus leaf, like a mustard seed from a needle tip, one to whom sensual pleasure does not stick. So when a drop of water hits a lotus leaf, it just rolls off without sticking. Or if you try to balance a mustard seed on the tip of a needle, it will just roll off. You can't get it to stick there. So in the same way, one who has well cultivated the mind of wisdom, the mind of compassion, the mind of equanimity, when they encounter sensual pleasure, it doesn't stick to them. It just rolls off. The experience comes and goes, but it doesn't make an imprint on the mind. They don't get lost in desire and attachment. Another important one, not entangled with either householders or monastics. So in other words, not getting wrapped up in unnecessary socializing. So we use communication as a means of helping other people, but not just as a way of wasting time or distracting ourselves or just passing the day. And also noticing how when we get caught up in other people's business, it becomes a source of distress. Distress for ourselves, and sometimes we actually wind up making things worse for the other people as well. But in particular, it creates a lot of distress for ourselves when we get entangled in other people's affairs and business. Not valuing any abode. So this has both a literal meaning and a applied meaning. So the literal meaning here is not being attached to your dwelling place. So being willing at any moment to get up and move. So Ajahn Jayasaro, who's a well-known British monk who lives in Thailand, he said that a monk should be able to pack their bags and be out the door within 15 minutes. I think he said 5 minutes. I might have rounded up a little bit because it takes me closer to 15 minutes. Let's cut the middle. Let's say 10 minutes. I should check with him someday and find out what number he actually said, but let's say 10 minutes. So a monk should be able to pack their bags and be out the door within 10 minutes. And if it takes you longer than that, you've got too much stuff. So this is one of the things that happens when we become attached to our dwelling place. We start accumulating a bunch of unnecessary stuff. We start filling it up with possessions and we get attached to it. We don't want to leave it behind. We don't want to go elsewhere. And attachment is the root of all dukkha. The other meaning of this, by the way, so abode also refers to a viewpoint or an opinion. So also not valuing any abode means being willing to leave behind our viewpoints and opinions. And this is particularly relevant in spiritual practice because our viewpoints and opinions are wrong. We know this for sure because we're not enlightened yet. Therefore, we know that whatever our current perspective is, it's definitely not correct. It might be getting closer to truth over time, but clearly it's not correct. So we need to be willing to leave behind our current viewpoint. And abode also has the idea of self-identity. Like we live within who we think we are. We live within what we think we are. So being willing to leave behind what we think we are. Because that, once again, is what's causing our dukkha. Another important one who communicates gently. So there's many places in the sutras where the Buddha emphasizes the importance of gentle, polite, respectful speech. And not just to people who are senior to you or more powerful than you or people that you're trying to get favors from, but everyone. Everyone we interact with, we speak to gently, politely, and respectfully. And it says, one in whom no aspiration can be found for this world or another. So in other words, one is not aiming at getting any particular status or achievement in this life, And we're also not aiming at any particular rebirth. So many people, even if they're devout Buddhists, they're not actually practicing to attain enlightenment in this life. They're just hoping to be reborn in heaven. And it's like, well, I mean, that's cute, but it's not going to do you any good in the long run. It's just more time wasting. And also trying to get things in this life. Like I've met a number of people over the years who said that they wanted to be monks, but first they wanted to go out and achieve such and such. And it's like, well, that's not going to do you the least bit of good. If you want to be a monk, then just be a monk. It's easier than it sounds. Kind of. Send me an email for more details. But achieving worldly goals won't bring us one step closer to enlightenment. No matter what your worldly goal is. Do you want to get a PhD? Well, you're currently engaged in the Buddhist Insights online pandemic PhD program, so congratulations. But if you want to get a PhD from an actual accredited university, why? Why bother? Seriously. Gosh, what a waste of time. Or you want to be the CEO, or you want to be famous, or you want to be the editor of a fashion magazine or whatever. Why? God, why would you waste your time pursuing these silly, meaningless things? When instead you could be cultivating the path that leads to limitless wisdom and compassion. Sounds a lot better, doesn't it? The phrase, one who has attained immersion in the deathless. So the deathless refers to the Nibbana Dhatu, the element of the unconditioned, which is ultimate reality, absolute reality beyond our concepts and ideas, beyond the limitations of sankharas. So immersion in the deathless means when one has left behind one's delusions and fully entered into the direct experience of absolute reality. Let's see. Then one who has abandoned connection to the human world and transcended connection to the divine, one who is not bound to any connection. So here also that's talking about not setting one's sights on any particular state of being, like not wanting to be any kind of human, but also not wanting to be any kind of deva, any kind of angel or deity or divine being of any sort either. So recognizing that any state of existence within samsara is ultimately unsatisfying and therefore not worth setting one's intent upon. Let's see, which other ones are worth emphasizing? Also, if there's any of these verses that you want more explanation of, go ahead and put it in the live chat and I'll talk about it during the Q&A. Because again, as I mentioned, I could spend hours just combing through these verses because they're so densely packed with information. Here's a really interesting one. One for whom there is nothing before, after, or in the middle. So one way of interpreting this is one for whom there is no attachment to the past, no attachment to the future, and no attachment to the present either. So they've completely left behind the concept of linear time. They've completely left behind this whole idea of past, present, and future. Because in the absolute, there's no such thing as past, present, and future. In the Nibbana Dhatu, there is no time. There is no past, present, and future. The appearance of past, present, and future is the product of the unenlightened mind, the product of the self-centered delusional mind. So then the Buddha says, it is a convention to assign a name and clan. So in other words, we, as a society, we agree to give each other certain designations. Like we say, I am American, she is Italian, she is Chinese, she is Burmese. But these are just words. They're just labels. But the labels are not the reality. They're just labels that we assign as a convention because it makes certain things slightly easier. It makes communication a little bit easier. But fundamentally, there's no difference between an American, an Italian, a Chinese, and a Burmese. Fundamentally, we're all humans, and we're all having basically the same experience, which is the experience of dukkha, conditioned by greed, hatred, and delusion, manifested through a human body and mind. Basically the same experience, which also means that we all have the same ability to come to a deep understanding of this experience, and therefore to break through the cycles of self-inflicted dukkha. Then the Buddha goes through emphasizing the world goes by action. The populace goes by action. In other words, we define people based on their actions, based on what they do, based on the choices that they make. So why would spiritual practice be any different? Why would we, if we say that it's actions which make one a merchant or a thief or a farmer or a warrior, why would we then arbitrarily say that a holy person is based only on their genetics? Or why would we arbitrarily say that only people of one gender or one race have spiritual capacities? It's just as meaningless, just as arbitrary. So regardless of one's gender or one's race or one's ethnicity or one's nationality, one's social class, one's status, if someone sincerely practices the spiritual path, then they have a claim to the title of holy person, of spiritual practitioner. And they have the capacity to attain full awakening, as the Buddha clearly states in countless suttas. He says, beings are bound to their actions, like the axle on which a wheel moves. This is another lovely simile the Buddha uses. So like the axle of a wheel is the pole in the middle which the wheel revolves around. So it's like the actions that we make, the choices that we make, we just keep revolving around those choices. So it's this sense of being determined and limited by our choices, which means our choices are incredibly important because they determine the scope of our experience. So then he talks about the three knowledges. So here he's using it in the Buddhist term. So the three knowledge is knowledge of past lives, knowledge of rebirth, and knowledge of how to purify one's mind, one's own mind. So this is quite a bit different from the three knowledges as used in Hinduism, where it refers once again to the body of scriptures that the Brahmins in Hinduism would memorize. And then the Buddha says, no such a one as Brahma and Sakka. So these were names of two of the highest deities that were worshipped at the time in popular religious practice. And the Buddha has encounters with Brahma and Sakka in a number of suttas. And it's quite clear that Brahma and Sakka, while they're powerful angels of some sort, they lack the deep wisdom of an enlightened being. Sakka actually does become a stream enterer in the suttas, which is encouraging. Brahma doesn't. None of the Brahma gods that the Buddha interacts with become stream enterers that I'm aware of. But the point he's making here is that he's saying these are two beings which are the most highly revered within some of the Brahmanical religious systems at the time. So he says the same reverence that you have for your highest gods, you should have that same reverence for someone who attains awakening, the same reverence for a human being who attains enlightenment. Then Vasettha and Bharadvaja said to the Blessed One, magnificent Sir Gautama, magnificent Sir Gautama, just as one might turn upright what has been overturned, or reveal what was hidden, or explain a path to one who is confused, or bring a lamp into the darkness so those with eyes can see. In the same way, Sir Gautama has explained the Dhamma in many ways. We go for refuge to Sir Gautama, to the Dhamma, and to the monastic Sangha. May Sir Gautama remember us as lay disciples who have gone for refuge for life. In other words, they became Buddhists. Good for them. So that's the end of the sutta. So we have a few minutes. If there's any questions or comments, we can go ahead and open up.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much, Bhante, for translating that beautiful sutta to begin with and then going through it with us. So, Susan had a question on the 8 precepts. How long did I agree to abstain from entertainment?
Well, for as long as you commit to in your mind, but I would recommend for the whole day.
And there's a back and forth about, but I think it has been solved already, about the caste system in India. And Jen is asking, is chanting Namo Amitabha in hopes of being reborn in the Pure Land considered a form of attachment? Someone made me aware that I might be attached to belief and I got confused.
That's a little bit different because the aspiration there is still to attain enlightenment. And it's just resolving upon a particular way of attaining enlightenment. So the basic idea of Pure Land practice is that one makes the aspiration to be born in Amitabha's land because the conditions there are ideal for attaining awakening as swiftly as possible. Whereas in this world, conditions are somewhat less than ideal. It's not impossible, it's just not ideal. So one makes the aspiration to be reborn in a world that is ideal, that has the perfect conditions for practicing Buddhism. And that has a living Samma Sambuddha, which can help guide us along the way. So the aspiration is still to attain enlightenment. And in fact, if you read the Pure Land Sutras, it also makes it clear that it's not enough just to wish to be reborn in the Pure Land. You also have to develop morality, samadhi, and wisdom in this life. If you want your vow to be effective, you have to develop sila, samadhi, and panya anyway. And actually, the more advanced spirit, Pure Land practitioners I've met were all quite lovely people, quite well-developed people, and with a very well-developed understanding of the Buddhist teachings, and with quite advanced sila, samadhi, and panya. So one is still practicing in this life to cultivate spiritual qualities, and one is resolving to be reborn under the ideal conditions for attaining awakening. So is there a bit of attachment there? Yes, but it's the same as the bit of attachment that's present in any Buddhist practitioner prior to attaining awakening. So it's not, I don't see anything wrong with that. So if Pure Land practice is something that you find helpful, then go for it. Yeah, it's okay.
And Suzanne is asking, does it matter so much what you do for a career as long as you place spiritual goals before your other aspirations? For example, what if you want more money so you can support monastic efforts?
Well, that's wholesome. Yeah, the wish to support the monastic sangha is very wholesome. It's very praiseworthy and admirable. The Buddha spoke extensively about the value of supporting monastic communities. The important thing with one's livelihood is to make sure that it's as harmless as possible. So it's better to take a lower paying job that's harmless than a higher paying job that's harmful. So that's the main consideration. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Okay.
And Sally is asking, free of aspiration and unfettered, quoted from the sutta. We still need aspiration to get enlightened for now, right?
Yes, you do. So that's a description of an enlightened being. An enlightened being no longer has aspiration because they've reached the highest goal. There's nothing left to aspire towards.
And Andy is requesting a talk on the three knowledges.
Okay, could be done. I'll make a note.
Great, approved. And Sally says, quote, unagitated, free of uncertainty, enlightened through non-attachment. May I ask, what does free of uncertainty mean?
There's no more doubt, because once you attain awakening, then you no longer have any doubt about what the Buddha was talking about, because you've directly seen it for yourself. So that's what free of uncertainty means.
Rupa asks, based on the sutta, it seems like an arahant would be called a Brahmin. And I think Brahmin is used as one worthy of highest respect based on the last sentence. Is that accurate, or are other followers of Buddha also called Brahmin in context of this sutta?
So, in the context of this sutta, the Buddha seems to be using Brahmin particularly to mean an awakened being. But actually, there's a number of places where he uses it in a more simple way, like one who does not steal anything, he calls a Brahmin. So that isn't necessarily something which only refers to enlightened beings. That's something which actually we've all committed to do today. Another one is one who has set aside violence, who neither injures nor kills. Again, that's something we've all committed to do today. So today we've decided to act like at least a slightly awakened being. So at least developing a little bit of the qualities of an awakened being. There's also elsewhere in the suttas where the Buddha uses Brahmin in a broader sense to mean people who are practicing the path, but who have not necessarily attained any stage of awakening. They just are practicing the path to one extent or another. But yeah, in this sutta, most of the verses where he defines a Brahmin seem to indicate an awakened being. And also elsewhere in the suttas, that's most commonly how he uses the word, as far as I can recall. Okay.
And Andy mentions that he was at a Pure Land retreat at the old Rockaway Summer House, which is our previous monastery and retreat center in Rockaway Beach. And Venerable Wuling was leading a retreat, and she's an incredible practitioner with palpable compassion and wisdom. So Annie is sharing, I was very skeptical of Pure Land, but that ended that day.
Yeah, actually, my recommendation, if you're skeptical about Pure Land, is go on a 7-day Pure Land retreat, preferably at a Chinese Mahayana monastery, because they've really refined the art of how to do Pure Land. It's really lovely. So I do Pure Land practice once in a rare while. It's not my main practice, but it's something that I do every now and then. And I did a Pure Land retreat, a 7-day Pure Land retreat in Taiwan last summer, and I was blown away. It was really, really amazing. So yeah, if you're still skeptical about Pure Land, just go and do a 7-day retreat, throw yourself into it wholeheartedly, and see what happens. Really wonderful experience.
And Sally is asking, Amitabha Buddha is in the West Pure Land world, a totally different world from this world. So there are still some Buddhas in other worlds right now.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's all for now, unless other people have any last minute questions. There's a lot of gratitude expressed to Dante for his teachings, and I second that as well. Thank you. Oh, Elaine is saying, any chance you could do a Pure Land online retreat? Well,
I'm not myself a Pure Land teacher. So I'm usually hesitant to lead practice in something that I'm not thoroughly steeped in, which is why I mostly talk about Theravada, even though I appreciate and practice other forms of Buddhism as well. The one that I feel most qualified to talk about is Theravada, so that's what I usually talk about. So I am not comfortable leading a Pure Land practice because I'm not deeply immersed in that style of practice. But we might be able to find somebody else who could lead something. We'll see. But I'm willing to bet if you look online, you can find other resources because it's the most popular form of Buddhism worldwide. So there's, admittedly, most of the materials are in Chinese, but still, it's the most popular form worldwide.
Yeah, so actually Venerable Wu Ling, who is the monastic that Andy was talking about earlier on, she teaches also online. So you can check, actually, if you send us an email at info@buddhistinsights.com, we can send you her information. I honestly doubt that we're going to be able to do a Pure Land online retreat anytime soon, because Bhante is the closest to the Pure Land practitioner that we have currently at Buddhist Insights. I don't practice it at all, and the majority of monastics that come here don't really have a Pure Land practice. So Bhante is the only one who's had, actually, he doesn't practice it either, but he has more of sort of background, not background. He has practiced it. Yeah. But Venerable Wu Lin, she is ordained in Pure Land Buddhism and does a lot of teachings online and in person. And Jen is asking, is there anything we should be doing for the full moon tonight?
Yeah, just try to spend the day focused on your spiritual practice. So spend the day doing sitting meditation, walking meditation, reading Dhamma books, reading suttas, listening to Dhamma talks. Try to keep your mind pure all day long. Whenever you notice yourself going off into defilement, just gently remind yourself, today is the Uposatha day. I've made a commitment to living a spiritual life today. So today I'm really trying to keep my mind pure and clear and clean as much as I can. Okay.
Okay. And Jayesh is saying there's to Rupa, there's an entire chapter in the Dhammapada called the Brahmanavago where Buddha talks about who's worthy of being called a Brahmin.
Yeah.
And Ki is asking, what's the name of the Pure Land monastery you went to in Taiwan?
So it was actually not a Pure Land monastery. It was a Vinaya monastery called Yuan Tong Si, which frequently has Pure Land retreats. But that's technically not the tradition that they follow. Technically, they're a Vinaya monastery, which is only for monks, by the way. So it's not a place where lay people go and spend time at. You can go and visit during the day, but they don't normally have lay guests staying any length of time. But there's a lot of other Pure Land monasteries. I mean, most of the monasteries in Taiwan are Pure Land monasteries. So you should have no trouble finding places. And actually, Dharma Drum has Pure Land retreats from time to time. They mostly do Chan retreats, but they have Pure Land retreats a couple times a year. Actually, the Dharma Drum Monastery in New York State, they usually have one 7-day Pure Land retreat every year. Again, even though it's a Chan monastery, they still do Pure Land because why wouldn't you? Better safe than sorry.
Okay. Suzanne is asking, would you consider recording yourselves chanting?
We can consider it.
We are considering it.
We have a cat cameo.
Yes, we can.
So, and today we have a special guest. His name is Stanley. Hi, Stanley. Say hi to the camera, Stanley. Hi, camera. Hello, friends. Hello, buddy.
He's not that terribly happy. He doesn't like to be told what to do. He likes it the other way around. He likes to do the voluntary cameos.
Hi. Hi. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Elaine says, Bhante is my Pure Land. And Stan says, meow. All right. And Sally is asking, last question, how to experience there is no present. Mhm.
Start with no past and future because that's much easier. One step at a time.
Okay. Corporal cuddling of Stan ye monasticat. So Stan is always popular. All right. Okay. I think that's all for today. I'm really glad to see that you have enjoyed the sutta. And it's really beautiful that you're so committed to practice and that you're really spending actually the upasata in a very good way and studying the teachings of the Buddha. And actually, the even more special thing is that even when it's not the upasata, you're doing exactly the same thing. So this is great. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Always meditating and studying the Buddhist teachings. All right. May you all be well and have a great.
All right. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.